professors and teachers of Reddit, what is the dumbest question a student has ever asked you? Story 1. This was about a month into the school year. A student would have a pencil at the beginning of class, but would lose it somehow and need another one which would inevitably disappear. I was confused, because he wasn't dropping them on the floor, so how was he losing them? I happened to see him throw a perfectly good, if dull, pencil into the garbage bin. I immediately rush over going, WOH, haha buddy, why are you throwing that away? There's nothing wrong with it. Him looking at me like I'm a bit slow, it's done. Him, I can't write with it anymore, right? So I need to throw it away. Isn't that what you do when they stop writing me? I then picked the pencil out of the garbage bin. It was just papers, luckily, and sharpened it right in front of him, wiped it off, and showed him, okay, you can write with it now. He looked at me like I'd just cured cancer. It was hilarious. As a side note, he was only 7. I still find it funny he thought you just threw dull pencils away, though. Story 2. Once, I had a student turn photocopies of another student's homework, like the actual copies, not that he rewrote them himself. Edit, this was a junior-level university course. Edit, the question was an email asking, why did I receive a 0 for this grade? Story 3. Do you want us to write our names on it in English? Asked the puzzled white American teenager in our rural American high school English class. I still have no idea what she meant. Edit, to add, she was born and bred in Texas. Comes from a long line of Texans. She speaks no other languages. She is not British. She's never been out of Texas. And I still have no idea what she meant. I didn't even respond. I just stared at her in disbelief. Story 4. We were talking about cells, cell parts, cell organelles, pass around a model of cell for them to look at. Nothing but cells. Student gets it and asks me, what planet is this? Story 5. One of my students asked why white people are mostly in charge of the government, if black people were here first. We live in the U.S. I told him that actually Native Americans were here first, and he scoffed at me. Story 6. It was a question about a question. I was proctoring a university exam. Kid puts his hand up. I tell him pre-university policy, look, to keep this fair, I can't really answer any questions. You're to write down your assumptions about the question beside it in case something is wrong. And ITLL be taken into account when it's marked if something is wrong with the question. University kid, honors business program, asks me, okay, sorry, what is in sometime? I thought he was being smart, so I said, write down what you assume to be an assumption along with your assumption, and it will be take. And as I'm saying it, I can see the blood draining from the poor kid's face as I realize he doesn't know. So I stopped and said sorry, then told him just to write what you think the problem is with the question beside it. Story 7. Not a teacher, but I once worked with a Jamaican that thought that Jews were time travelers because it was the year 5775 according to the Hebrew calendar. Took me an hour to try to explain that Jews weren't from the future. He still didn't get it. Story 8. Not a teacher, but in a history lesson during year 11, we watched a recreation of the nuke that hit Hiroshima. The video showed buildings collapsing and a guy being vaporized. After the video ended, there was a brief silence before this girl said, would that kill you? Story 9. Not a teacher, but a classmate recently asked if there was more than one moon because it's in all different countries at once, like it could be in Turkey and Antarctica at once, know what I mean? I was bewildered. Edit -3, 2K upvotes, feeling quite sexy today. Saw one reply saying the girl was joking. I hate to say she wasn't. Not the first time she's said something like this. Story 10. Not in my class, but I had someone ask, aren't Egyptians extinct? In complete seriousness, the guy sitting behind him was Egyptian, and he just dropped his head to the table. Story 11. I was in high school in 72 long, before the internet was a thing. During a health class discussing nutrition, we were going over various food groups and the benefits the nutrients and vitamins played on our body's organ function, etc. A 16-year-old kid actually seemed to be under the notion cauliflower was a bread and not a vegetable. Not sure the reasoning there. Maybe he had never seen one since they were fairly unheard of in the area we grew up in. Story 12. I had a handful of middle school students insist that Mount Rushmore was a work of nature. Edit, better phrasing. I had a handful of middle school students insist that Mount Rushmore was a natural formation, faces and all. Story 13. In 6th grade, we were talking about the Pope, and this girl asked the teacher, is the Pope Jewish? To which her teacher patiently responds, no, he is Catholic. After thinking for a moment, the girl continues, then why does he wear such a funny hat? This next one isn't so much a stupid question, but by far the most hilarious sequence of events I've witnessed during my childhood. Was in a 9th grade history class, and our first test was on global geography, capitals, fun facts, etc. Basic stuff. Day before the test, we have a board race as a fun way to prepare. So it's this girl's turn to race to the board. The question is, what is the capital of Ireland? Now this is a gimme, so it's an all-out sprint to the board. Said girl trips over a backpack and eats absolute. Her competitor is barreled over laughing, as is the rest of the class. Determined not to blow such an easy question, she miraculously recovers. dashes to the board, and confidently writes her answer. Cleveland, you know in movies when someone up and there is this cricket noise, pretty much that happened. In complete silence, her competitor walks to the board and writes the correct answer. She turns bright red and darts out of the room, slamming the door behind her. As she does, the clock on the wall falls to the ground and shatters. We didn't get anything done for the rest of that class. I've always wondered how she did on that test. Story 14, all from the same girl. We were in Washington, D.C., and at the end of the trip, she had to have a teacher point out where we were on a map because she thought we were in Washington State. She asked if rocks were living organisms. She asked why California doesn't just drink the ocean water in all honors classes somehow, just not the brightest. Story 15, I did a walking tour in Berlin. Someone asked the guide, what's the worst question you have been asked? He said, well, this guy from Australia, after the 3-hour tour was finished, asked, okay, so how did Hitler get here from Australia? He hesitated and said Hitler was from Austria. The dude looked confused and said, yeah, so am I. So I'm wondering why he came all the way to Europe to do all the things he did. The tour guide said he almost felt bad, but had to be honest. AUS Trail A is the county you are from. AUS Tree A is a European country just next to Germany. Story 16, not a professor, but I am a professor's assistant, and I am in charge of doing their daily quizzes. I will often have a joke silly answer to multiple choice questions for option E. Without fail, even after informing them that E is never the right answer, someone will answer E, so where it might not be a dumb question. It sure is a case of a dumb answer. Story 17, met a student who was coming to my school the next year. Me, what kinds of books do you like to read? Student, I don't really like to read. Me, okay, well, what was the last book that you read? Student, you mean like chapter book I taught 11th grade. Story 18, not a question, but a great anecdote nonetheless. While discussing places in Washington, D.C. with my drama club kids, I explained what the mall is, the grass promenade area between the Capitol and Washington Monument, which many important buildings border. One of my juniors at the time looked at me in horror and said, oh my God, I didn't know it wasn't a shopping mall. I wrote an essay in social studies about how terrible it was that they were thinking of putting a Holocaust memorial in a mall. I used a phrase, and Frank shouldn't be next to a food court. It's been 4 years and I still laugh just thinking about it. Poor, naive girl. Story 19, I might be late to the thread and am not a teacher. But regardless, this is a really stupid question. When I was in 6th grade, I think it was 6, we were talking about John Smith in social studies. One girl asked the teacher if John Smith was George Washington. The teacher says no with a disappointed tone at the stupidity of the question. She then asked if he is Abraham Lincoln. I just couldn't understand how someone could ask so stupid questions. Story 20, not a teacher, but I took a science fiction literature class in uni, and a fellow classmate said she didn't find her reading relevant because there haven't been any wars in like 200 years. My friends, who was multitasking Half-Life 2 on his laptop through the lecture, jaw dropped as he turned to look at her. Story 21, not the teacher, but my classmate back in high school asked how the astronauts could land on the moon when it was flat and had no gravity. Without even hesitating, my chemistry teacher explained that they shot a harpoon gun at the moon and looped around it until they ran out of rope. To walk in the moon, they used a harpoon gun in each hand. To this day, I don't know how he explained that without laughing. Story 22, I'm a high school science teacher. I've given this answer before, but I'll say it again here. I had a student ask Mr. Mookie Prime, I dreamed that I was raped by a foot. What does it mean? Seeing my blank stare, she continued, you studied physics, so you must know all about dreams. Story 23, this is easy. I am 9 years into my teaching career, and only one question has ever been so dumb. Watching Apollo 13. The scene is when they first tell Houston they have a problem, and they show mission control, and a student says something to her friend. Her friend says you can't ask him that. Naturally, my interest is piqued. I walk back and ask her what her question is. Are all of those guys there named Houston? First off, how many guys have you met there named Houston? Second, what are the odds that there are 40 of them in the same room? Gee whiz. Story 24. So, this was a question I asked a particular sweet but unsophisticated 17-year-old student that I loved. We were at the Smithsonian Museums in D.C. Me. So would you like to go with our group into the Air and Space Museum? Her, that sounds so boring. Yuck, no. Me, it's one of the most popular museums on the mall, her Air and Space Museum. Why would anyone want to see that? Me, you think it's just a museum full of air and space, don't you, her? Yes. Story 25, I teach 8th grade and have a student who relishes the chance to ask extremely inappropriate questions apropos of nothing. Multiple times, if he isn't acknowledged the first time, my go-to answer has become you should ask your mother, which he seems to forget is the go-to and results in massive sulking every time it works especially well. Times when this has paid off nicely in recent days. MS Reddish, is it true that pregnant women get really horny? MS Reddish, what is cackling fit? MS Reddish, do people really like to have with donkeys? Okay, we're reading in Midsummer Night's Dream right now, so it wasn't quite apropos of nothing. but it would be nearly irrelevant if he actually read the play. Story 26 in 7th grade history. The teacher had told us that if you flip the image of Europe, it looks like the Queen, so this guy 2 seats behind me brilliantly blurts out, did they do that on purpose? Apparently someone decided to tell him about the great European coastal remodeling to shape Europe like the British Queen. Story 27, I apparently had the dumb question. I taught a psychology lab. 2 students come up to me and ask if I will help them with their stats for their final paper. Fine, no problem. Help them set it up. Paper is due at 4. It's about 3. I ask how they plan on writing their discussion section in 1 hour. They look at me like I'm dumb and say, we already wrote the discussion section. They did not pass that class. Story 28, why I avoid junior high substitute jobs. Okay, class. Today's work is review. You'll be doing pages 126 to 127, 1 to 115. Odds only, I've written this on the board for you. And I'm here if you have any questions. Student raises hand. What pages? Different student raises hand. I need help with number 12, student 3. What about the critical thinking question on page 128? Student 4, what numbers are we doing? And on and on. Story 29, we have a take-home exam for the course. The questions are released at the start of the exam period, and the students have 2 weeks to complete the answers. It's dead easy. Student emails me this question paraphrasing. So, since the take-home exam falls during the exam period, doesn't that mean it clashes with my other exams? Can I get a deferment? I had no idea how to explain to her that. No, a take-home exam which you have 2 weeks to complete does not clash with other normal exams during the exam period. And no, you can't get a deferment on a take-home exam that you can complete literally whenever you want. Jesus Christ. That is the only stupid question I can actually think of. The stupid questions are the ones that have nothing to do with course content and everything to do with trying to weasel out of doing coursework. Story 30, not a teacher, but my 8th grade history teacher was definitely asked the dumbest question ever, and I was there to witness it. Now, honestly, I can't remember what the question was, but someone had just asked a question, to which my teacher delivered a detailed, lengthy, and eloquent explanation. Another student raised her hand and asked the exact same question verbatim. My poor teacher grabbed his keys, calmly walked to the back of the classroom, unlocked and opened his storage cabinet, leaned forward and stuck his head in it, then screamed murder, after which he very calmly stood back up straight, closed and locked the storage cabinet, returned to the head of the class, and resumed the discussion as if the entire spectacle had not just occurred. It was hysterical. Story 31, most of my dumb questions I get happen like this. Okay, we will review on Tuesday, and the test will be in Thursday. Review Tuesday, and test on Thursday. Any questions? Everyone got it, Kevin. You got a question? Is the test Thursday? Yes, Kevin, it's on Thursday. Sammy, you got a question? Yes, we'll have a review on Tuesday. Anyone else? Then Tuesday comes, and I get, Professor, are we having a test today? Story 32, not a teacher, but I was an English tutor in college. One time after work, I was just chatting with my last student of the night when the conversation turned to horses, as our college had a large equine department. She asked, and this is verbatim, cows are just horses that got fat, right? I couldn't believe it. I always tried my best not to make anyone I tutored feel stupid, but I couldn't help but hysterically laugh. Story 33, I know I'm late, but I have to add this one. There was this girl in my college zoology class who told the teacher she didn't believe humans were mammals or animals at all. She was a biology major, lol. Story 34, I was in a college history class. The teacher was discussing dams that were built during the Great Depression. A girl up front raised her hand and said, where did they find the water? Story 35, I'm not a teacher, but one of my classmates kept asking if government people countries were good or bad in our civics class. Is Stalin good or bad? Is England bad? Referring to constitutional monarchy, is communism good or bad? Keep in mind that she has already turned 15. Story 36, credit to know the red. It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects. But 99.99999 of the time they're keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick to not judge fish for their tree climbing ability. You know, I thought this was a rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we use to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry. It was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk and work with the student for a bit. I thought that's fine. They'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who had forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia incident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade. And now he was in 9th grade, Flabbergasted, I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming trait in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So hey race a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists, and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is 9th grade. I have no idea where he got crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me, his English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided, to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school, Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at 711 after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire. Twice Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't him. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it. It rang. He denied that it was ringing. Not that it wasn't his, not that he did it. No, he denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried it 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the basketball coach a motherfucking bitch during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mom could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools, none of which he ever went to. Kevin tased himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn to alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin say the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The high school was 84 black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, classwork, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3 average. He tried to bribe me with 11. Kevin spit on a girl and said you should get out of those wet clothes. The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download onto a computer in the library at the circulation desk while he was logged on. Kevin asked a girl to prom. He was in 9th grade, and freshmen don't go to prom by asking for her phone number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum his hair constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I'd pick them all up, and then writing a name on it wherever there was room. Kevin had several allergies, but neither his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party at high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note, he was allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How they did, they even get airline tickets and forgot all their luggage at home. I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to his mom, who told me first thing when I saw her at the bi-weekly meeting, Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day. Story 37 in my world history class. We had the dumbest student in our group. She asked how do Eskimos build igloos when they have paws. She thought polar bears were Eskimos. Later in the class, she pulls out a can of beans and a can opener and proceeds to open the can and eat in the middle of class. The teacher both times just stared at her in awe. Story 38, not a teacher. But in my first year 14 to 15 years old of high school history class, we briefly discussed the Salem witch trials. A girl in the front asked if they caught any real witches, considering her reaction when the class laughed. This was by no means meant as a joke. The teacher was speechless and awkwardly tried to continue the lesson without answering to not embarrass the girl too bad. Story 39, we were watching an episode of the 90s X-Men cartoon, and a girl asked how it was in color if it came out in the 90s. She thought that color was only added to movies in the 2000s. This was an 11th grade class. Story 40, surprisingly. The dumbest questions always come from teachers in my experience. Yes, students will sometimes have brain farts, but they're in school to learn, so that's kind of okay. I'm working with younger kids, though. It probably gets worse when students are older. At lunch break, hey, I saw you going over the English vocabulary from this chapter with some of the kids earlier. Don't you think you should wait until after the vocabulary test to help them with that? No, I shouldn't. Wait, my PC just turned itself off. Is the power gone? Nah, it's just standby mode because you didn't use it for 10 minutes. And your desk light right next to the monitor is still on too. Student from a poorer family living quite far from town comes in late, red cheeks, obviously out of breath, and apologizes for being late. The school bus didn't come and he had to ride the whole way by bike, and she asks, super surprised you can afford a bike. 2 of the 3 are from one person, and she is not working as a teacher anymore. But still, she was for more than 20 years. Story 41, not a question, but sophomore year of high school, our history teacher was going around the classroom getting people to name presidents. One girl said Harrison Ford. Story 42, not a teacher, but in my CPR class, the instructor was telling a story of how a baby had been decapitated during birth because the person delivering the baby pulled too hard or something like that. A girl raised her hand. Was the baby okay? No, it wasn't. Story 43, I remember back in like 6th grade, my teacher explained how it was something I forgot what it was had been done for all the presidents since Washington. My buddy asked about the presidents before Washington. We still mock him for that sometimes. Story 44, after uttering and translating a German phrase, Erst denken. Dan Handeln, first think then act. A student asked what language that was, to which I said German. She replied with I love it. When people can speak a dead language, I looked up and stared through the dropped ceiling and into the soul of the universe, asking how and why I should go on. Story 45, teaching assistant here, was TA along with 9 other grad students for a large class, held once a week discussion sections for 2 classes of 30 students each. Some kids never came to the discussion sections. First exam, the professor goes over the instructions and then tells the students, when you're finished with the test, bring it down front and give it to your TA. We were all sitting on the edge of the stage at the front of the lecture hall. 20 minutes into the exam, a young man struts down the aisle with his blue book in his hand, the first to finish. But the smugness slowly drained from his face as he got closer to the stage. By the time he reached us, he had achieved a slight look of panic. Are you my TA? He asked of the closest grad student. I don't know, am I? Came the reply. TL Durgo to at least one discussion section, so you can recognize your TA. You never know when that knowledge will come in handy. Story 46, not a teacher, but this one always kills me inside. English teacher made a reference to 1984, saying something about how Big Brother is watching. Girl goes, I love that show. ID, give her the benefit of the doubt. If it wasn't for the fact that this teacher had a big poster on the wall right in front of this girl that said Big Brother is watching, and every wall in this teacher's room is plastered with quotes. The only wall without posters was the one with the bookshelf. Maybe she didn't know about the book, but I feel like she should have picked up on him referencing a book due to the poster and the teacher himself. The guy IS Literature, he's the only teacher I've ever had who I looked forward to hearing narrate. Story 47, another thread somewhere had a teacher say one of his students started an essay with no one knows how or why Al Capone was born. Always cracks me up. Story 48, it's very common for students to send emails that basically say, I wasn't in class for some reason. That's obviously bullshit. Did I miss anything important? Nope, not a thing. I spend hours prepping lectures that have no value to the course material whatsoever. Oh, and thanks for letting me know so I can be sure to include it on the test. Next time I get one of these, I'm sending this poem in response. Story 49. This is actually a dumb question I asked in my honor civics class. My teacher was talking about Rhode Island and how the first people that walked there from Maine. I asked how did they cross the water? Cue look of bafflement on everyone's face. Me, because it's an island. I learned that day that Rhode Island actually isn't an island. Still think it's a stupid name. Story 50, I'm not a teacher, but my U.S. history class has some great questions, like when someone asked if the Native Americans hunted lions. Not even mountain lions or something possibly realistic, just straight-up African lions, in the plains of the U.S. Story 51, I'm taking a medical terminology class in university. We had a test last week, and a girl from the class asked me what the quiz was going to be on. I told her chapters 1 to 4, which was stated on the class website. She responded, but like, is it all terminology? No, Linda. We are being tested on interpretive dance in our terminology class. Not actual name P.S. During the test, which was multiple choice, she asked the professor if we were supposed to circle the answer. No, Linda. If you just think of the answer really hard, the professor will just be able to read your mind. Story 52, not a teacher, but one classmate in my forensic psych class in college asked the professor who had a psych class and experience as an expert witness if he could explain parking tickets to her. Another classmate thought forensic psychology had to do with DNA testing. Story 53, mobile mammogram truck is at school. Kid coach, what's a mammogram? Me, an x-ray of the mammary glands. Kid, so they're checking for Alzheimer's. Me, yep, that's what they're doing. Bless his heart. Story 54, not a teacher and not a question, but someone was asked something like this. Koalas can sleep up to 22 hours a day. What continent can you find koalas on? He said Russia. Story 55, actually, I had an exam for my students today on critical theory and popular culture. So I asked a student what movie she saw recently so that we can have something concrete to see if she understands a theory. She says Atomic Blonde. And I ask her what's the significance of the period the movie takes place in. She says that she doesn't know much about the 1940s. Story 56, not a professor, but I know the professor well, and was in his class when this occurred. He was explaining the concept of regional heterothermy to the college freshman bio class for bio majors. Regional heterothermy is essentially when an animal maintains one part of its body at a different temperature than other parts, which is something you even see occurring in certain cold-blooded animals. In this case, he was talking about how tunas use it to keep their brains at a slightly warmer temperature than the rest of the body while on deep dives. The following exchange ensued. Student A raises hand. Professor, yes. Student A, so, are tunas mammals? Professor, incredibly confused by trying to maintain composure. No, tuna fish are not mammals. They have just developed specialized muscles. Student B raises hand. Professor, yes. Student B, so, are whales mammals? They don't have legs. Professor, I honestly don't remember how he answered. Also, these were college biology majors, the majority of which want to go to med school. Somehow a college bio major did not know that a fish is not a mammal, and another one didn't know what defines a mammal, but apparent in her mind it must have legs. Story 57, I was teaching 9th grade American history. We were working on a geography unit on the contiguous U.S., and they were given a blank map to help them chart important cities, physical geography, etc. Mr. Yes, student, which way is up? I'm sorry, which way is up? Do you see the compass rose? I put one in the Atlantic Ocean as a guide. If I'm understanding you correctly, north is up. I ain't see no flower here. Okay, do you see our state? It looks like a mitten. Student turns paper upside down, points to Florida, turns paper 180 degrees. Okay. Do you see where you put your name at the top of the paper? This is correct. To her credit, she completed the assignment 100 correctly without any other assistance. She had nowhere to go but up, I guess. Story 58, one of my middle schoolers asked me recently if my grandma is dead. Am I still alive? I just gave him the look and went back to my lesson on exponents. No clue where that came from. Both his grandmas are alive. Story 59, I've taught ESL English as a second language predominantly to students from the MENA region, including isolated tribal groups. We'll never forget the time I offhandedly said something relating to like the Holocaust, and I realized they had no idea what I was talking about. I attempted to give a simplified, basic English explanation of Hitler and the Holocaust and how many people died. We'll never forget the girl with her mouth open going, this is terrible. And this really happened. Do other people know about it? Story 60, not a professor or teacher, but once in 7th grade health class, a girl asked our gym teacher if your heart could travel to your foot. Her example was when you bang your foot against something by accident. It throbs, and you can feel your heartbeat in your foot. Therefore, your heart must travel. I've never again heard a more stupid question. Story 61, on the first day of 10th grade math class, we were talking about career paths. This one girl states that she would like to be a lobbyist like her parents, so she could uphold the Declaration of Independence. When asked if she meant the Constitution, she replied they're basically the same thing. When told that only one had any legal standing, she stated that she knew that the teacher was wrong, because her dad worked with the Declaration all the time. After all, the Declaration has all those amendment thingies. Story 62, if there's a New England, does that mean there's an Old England? I've been asked some form of this question every year. I teach high school in America. Story 63, my dad was the teacher. Not me. Question was asked by a girl that would have been 16 or so at the time, September 11, 2001. Instead of doing coursework, they were watching the news. One of his students asked, will this be over by 4 p.m.? I'm not sure, but I doubt it. Why? That's when Bold and the Beautiful is supposed to start. Story 64, percussion instructor. Had one of my bass players ask, randomly, if Mexico was a part of the United States. Then the next day, he shared that he hopes he can go to Jupiter one day to see if it's real. Story 65, my grade 8 students didn't know where Africa was, but the next day, I tried playing a game where they matched countries and their flags together. The boys were doing amazing, so I asked them how they knew the flag of Kazakhstan, but didn't know where Africa was on the world map. Teacher, we play a lot of FIFA. Story 66, a friend of mine asked, while discussing organ transplants and biology, if a heart is transplanted, do feelings also transfer from the one person to the other, like the feeling of a broken heart? Story 67, a student college who thought the word violence was spelled violets, and had an entire paper discussing violets in the media. No red squiggle in word, so it must be correct. Story 68, my sister is a community college English teacher in the upper Midwest. She's in her mid-40s. A student asked her once if she remembers Pearl Harbor. She said, dear child, my parents don't remember Pearl Harbor. Story 69, took human sexuality course in college. Covered anatomy, physiology, education, and art film literature, etc. Wide range of topics. The professor said in all her years of teaching, the one question she was asked consistently by male college students was, how does a tampon not get lost inside a woman? Story 70 High School Honors English Class. Freshman level, Romeo and Juliet. The teacher had tenure and gave no, and at some point made a comment about the title characters trying to sneak off to play hide the sausage. After some giggling from the titillated students, a quiet settled back over the room. It was broken by the outgoing, popular girl asking in all seriousness, "I get what you're saying, but where would they hide the sausage?" The room went dead silent for about 3 seconds as 25 heads swiveled to stare at her. Some mouths gaped. She looked around, went beet red, and just went, "Oh." We found out later they heard the laughter a couple of rooms away.